As you may know, Derrick is running for a spot. There are two spots up for election on our Arizona Corporation Commission, which is our utility regulator for the state of Arizona. It's a constitutional statewide office. Derrick's running for one of those seats. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Derrick. Why don't you do a self introduction and talk to us about the work of the Arizona Corporation Commission and your race?
Great. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, so I am Derrick Espadas. I'm right here in Pima County. I am a local accountant. I have to thank you for giving me a break because K1s are due today and I'm rushing through those. So this moment gives me a chance to step away. I'm also an educator and a local organizer, specifically with the No Desert Data Center Coalition. So we'll probably end up talking a lot about those good old data centers that are popping up everywhere. But I'm a U of A grad, graduated my degree in accounting and management, went to Syracuse for my MBA, and then, on sabbatical now from working on my doctorate at Case Western in business. Just and right now I also serve on the Commission of Disability Issues as a commissioner, where I'm very glad to say when I first joined, we started off as almost like a social club. And now we've moved together. We've all been a part of it to actually doing good work and causing trouble, making the city council pay attention to us instead of just being a check mark. So yeah, the Corporation Commission, for those of you who don't know, the easiest way to describe it is they're the ones responsible for raising your electric bill rates. They also do it's a weird entity. They're also in charge of railroad safety. And whenever you start a business, your S Corp, your LLC, it goes through them. As well, they're supposed to be the consumer advocates of the state. And I have no problem saying that that is a very questionable assertion at the moment. But the main thing that everyone really kind of knows them for is usually, so there are exceptions, whenever TEP or APS or any smaller for-profit electric entity wants to raise your rates, they have to get the permission of the Arizona Corporation Commission. So there are exceptions. So like SRP in Phoenix is exempt. I believe Page is exempt because they're nonprofit. And so if you're a nonprofit, you don't fall within the jurisdiction of the ACC unless there is some kind of structural capital investment that needs to be made, and then you do have to go to the ACC. But the main thing that we've been dealing with is TEP and APS asking for a 14% increase. And really, my position is just no. It's not a no but, not a no maybe, or no what if. It's just no. And largely what that comes from is it's always follow the money. Those who benefit are the large corporations, whether it's the actual power providers or the auxiliary. So the ACC doesn't regulate data centers, but again, the infrastructure going to them, it does. And so infrastructure to the data centers falls under what they cover. And so all these large corporations, most of them have nothing to do with Arizona. They're not from here, are gaining all the benefit. And what that will impact is not only us as ratepayers, but those on fixed incomes who can't afford 14%. And we'll jump to that. As well as small businesses. So especially restaurants. Restaurants operate on small margins. 14% will kill them. It's just not so we're looking at hurting people. And when they talk about a lot of it is oh, we need to expand economics, stability. You don't do that by killing off small businesses while leveraging it towards large corporations. Yeah, the AG may I don't know about clearly shown. Um, I also know not to argue with the lawyer. Actually, I don't know any better than that, but So that's one of the things I would say has to be looked into. So the ACC operates on its own power. I just realized, bad pun. Um, no one watches over them. They watch over themselves. So if there is ever an ethics issue or an issue with the ACC, they regulate themselves. That's a problem. So there's a thing called a certificate of necessity and convenience. And what that does is that gives the AC its power to establish these monopolies all through the state. There are certain sections of that document that either limit or completely eradicate the power of the AG. And I think that's something that would have to be changed at the legislature, but it limits whoever the AG is, and I hope it continues to be AG Mays, it limits their ability to enforce certain articles. It limits their ability just to fight and defend and do the work that the ACC is supposed to do in protecting consumers. It limits that whole office. It limits their ability to actually enforce. And a lot of this is probably from what I've seen at the ACC. There is a lot of jurisdictional fighting. No one wants to give up power, and that becomes a problem because again, their job is to protect the ratepayer, which they say a lot. Like every time they do something, they will talk about how they are there to protect the ratepayer and then do something to not protect the ratepayer. And it's very inconsistent. That's what I've seen there because within the same day, they'll say this particular project should go back to the community for a community decision, and those communities tend to be red. But then when it comes, and specifically with the Project Blue, I think we were told we just need to learn to enjoy the chaos. And so it's very inconsistent as far as protecting the ratepayer and what they consider that. And I think that has to be done a little more evenly. And again, there's very little oversight as to what the ACC can. There is an administrative judge on staff, but the administrative judge is also attached to the commissioners. So, and it's kind of like staff. Um, they're there to protect their own jobs, so they're attached. And I did speak to a former staff member who said that did agree. That's very much the case. If the staff is there to please the commissioners, not to actually present information for them to make a good judgment on. And so that's basically what's going on. I'd love to protect rates, the environment. They just repealed what are known as the rest rules, which are kind of environmental milestones. We should be at this point by this date. They repealed those. Their comment was that they didn't, the staff's comment was that they had no effect on anything. And I spoke at that hearing that if they had no effect, then why remove them? And it was done to show what direction the current ACC wants to move in. Commissioner Thompson, we were at a utilities conference, and his statement there was that we need to fulfill the mandate of the president by having a data center on every street corner. And I will say at that same utility conference, I had to make a decision. I knew my audience, they're utility companies. And the question was, would I side with the ratepayer or the utility company? And I was not comfortable doing it because, again, I knew the audience, or I thought I knew the audience, and I said I would always side with the ratepayer. And what happened was I had so many utility companies coming to me saying, yeah, we need to do that. It's out of balance. So what that showed me was that the ACC is currently the problem because even the utility companies are talking about needing the ratepayer to have more of a say, and we just don't. And we've seen that when we've gone to the ACC. We've seen that at the county level. We've seen it a lot currently, which at the city level, that people themselves do not get the say that the lawyers, the lobbyists, and the consultants get. So that's my rant for today. I would love to take questions because I keep hearing my voice at all these meetings and I'm kind of tired of me.
Yeah, we could do that for you. Absolutely. And let me add myself to the spotlight and remind everybody that if you want to ask a question live on video or audio, just go ahead and use your reaction bar down at the bottom and hit raise hand. That'll put you in a queue to ask a question live. If you don't want to ask your question live or you can't, just bung it in the chat and I'll ask it for you. Looks like Dave has made a comment there. Let's see if we can get a question out of there. My understanding is that the basis for these large rate increase requests is that investors in private for-profit companies are demanding 10 to 12% guaranteed rates of return or they will not invest, which is ridiculous on its face. Yeah, gotta agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think of that, Derrick?
I think that's definitely the issue. So in the case of TEP during the ACC hearings, they were swearing there'd be no rate increase. Um, Although they even had the case in before. They were swearing it had nothing to do with investors, but in their annual SEC filings, it specifically says we are not making enough profit. We are going to try to court as many data centers as possible so that we can increase our profit. Now, what happens though, again, the typical process up and down at the ACC county city is these investors that have their lawyers speak. They do a presentation for however long they want. Um, they say whatever they want because there is no valid data coming out of data centers. They are not releasing data on what they do. So
Hmm.
the
I see
numbers
what you
are
mean.
projections. And as an accountant, a projection means make believe. Like
Yeah,
it just is. I can
just
come
a
up with a
set of
projection on
assumptions,
anything.
and yeah,
And
who knows whether
so
those assumptions are correct or not?
yeah, if you make 1,000 projections, you're bound to get one of them correct. And so they do these numbers. Now the people get to speak, but it's usually because the opposition is so many. You usually get 2 minutes to give your entire dissertation. Um, and then the lawyer gets to come back again and say, no, they're not right. In one case, in the Morena case, they asked the representative from TEP, who is a PR rep, not an executive decision-making executive, swear to me you promise not to raise rates. And they said, yes, we will never raise rates. So
Say
it gets
anything.
very frustrating because a lot of people are showing up to which is difficult. We know that not a lot of people participate in the process.
Yeah.
And then to have them participate and feel like they're ignored, that doesn't help democracy. That reinforces this idea that our voice means nothing. And so when when so, I wish I could demand 10%. Like,
Yeah,
don't we
exactly.
all?
Yeah, and especially given that it's like guaranteed return. I mean, we're talking about a monopoly here. You know,
Yeah.
when a return on capital is set at 10%, that's what they actually get. There's no real risk
Well,
involved.
and so this is only when they ask. So there is a automatic formula that occurs naturally. It got implemented in 2024. And essentially it's whatever I like picking on TEP, so I'm going to use that. Whatever TEP spends, uh, plus capital expenditure minus depreciation times what they asked for. So
Yeah.
this 14% is on top of whatever's already going to increase. Now, whatever they spend, we're talking executive salaries, which TP does not report, even though they're supposed to by law. The capital expenditures, there's no disclaimer that says it has to be for something. They can just go build a thing, and then we get that passed on to us on
And it doesn't
top.
actually have to benefit customers
Yeah,
or lower costs or anything. Yeah.
no. So we get that multiplied by what that 14% that they're asking for.
Yeah. I mean, that may be in response to Dave there, 10 to 12% might be what the market is demanding, but that's not saying that it's a reasonable demand. Dave comes back. Ultimately, I think we need to abolish private ownership of natural monopolies such as utilities and convert them to public or cooperative ownerships. No idea on the mechanism to make that happen. Well, in fact, we're trying to make that happen here in
Yeah.
Tucson. We're seriously considering taking over the TEP to city ownership, collective ownership. Do you have a reaction or response to that,
I,
Derrick?
I'm for it. I'm part of it. It will not be a simple switch over. It will be messy. It might even be expensive. Personally, I think it's worth it. And it's also, again, one of the excuses that the current commissioners use. They talk about the free market. We must protect the free market. Well, you can't have a monopoly in a free market.
Yeah.
And
Well, you can, but you shouldn't.
it
Not exactly a
that
free market if we have a monopoly.
yeah, and TP also makes the excuse that it's not their fault. They're not making money. And I just believe if you have a monopoly, if you were the only attorney in all of Arizona and came to me and said, I can't make any money, I would say that's a you problem, not an us problem.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a couple questions from the audience. We got a couple hands up. Barathon put his hand up first.
Hey,
Hello, Barathon friend.
hi.
Barathon's a member, well, recently, until very, very recently, a member of our board. So, welcome, Barathon.
Thank you. Hey, Derek, I'm going to change the subject partially. One of the things that I'm really, really concerned about is about solar energy.
Mhm.
And one of the things that the ACC has been saying repeatedly with, I like your position on that, is that people who have solar on their rooftops are subsidizing people who don't have solar on their rooftops. And they've been using that to sort of say that solar is not really a good thing to do. And we should allow the TEP to charge a ridiculous rate for the power that they buy from solar roofs, which makes it a very difficult proposition for people like me who want to have solar roofs on their houses. What's your stand on that?
I don't agree with what they say. So I believe so they use this argument that we shouldn't be subsidizing anything, that everything should stand on its own in the free market. But what we do is we subsidize natural gas piped in, which they want to build a pipe for, a new pipe, which is going to come to us to pay for. We are subsidizing Texas billionaires to bring in that natural gas. What I also, if we had a larger scale solar, we can have a Arizona first industry rather than importing, start exporting. But the money gained or that they have to pay is so minuscule to what they're extracting. And having people not rely so heavily on our grid, our infrastructure is not good. And so the more people we can get off our infrastructure, the more it's going to benefit everyone as a whole. And again, TP made $200 million plus in profit last year. They're okay. They can do a little more in paying in solar. They're not they're not gonna hurt anytime soon.
Any follow up, Bar? Yeah. All right. Yeah, well, I noticed recently, and probably a few people have heard the news that the ACC recently repealed any alternative energy standards whatsoever in Arizona. What do you think about that?
That yeah, I was, those were the rest rules. And I really do think that was more of a political movement of like this is who we are.
Mm.
And quite frankly, the current incumbents on the ACC feel like they're not going to be replaced. They feel and it is hard to get rid of an incumbent, but they feel that they're firmly entrenched and they want to set their standard. Again, Commissioner Thompson at that utility conference was talking about how they proudly got rid of all the disruptive remnants of the prior regimes, and they were talking about a lot of the Democratic people that were still there. So they have a vision, they want to enact the vision, and I don't really think they care about who's in the way.
Yeah, and there's very little voice of opposition on the board now. I mean, they're all five Republicans. Most of them are MAGA. I
Yeah.
think there's one or two that are still trying to actually advocate a little bit for the ratepayer, but it's few and far between.
I actually had hope for Commissioner Walden. She
Yeah,
she she was very much against what I would be for ideologically, but she
mhm.
asked good questions.
Yeah,
But that has disappeared.
yeah. And I don't think she's up for election this cycle, right?
No, she's safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to point out in case people aren't aware, there are two seats up for election out of five, and so even if we win both those seats, we're not going to have a majority. We're just going to have a minority voice. That'll take another cycle. We had that
Yes.
chance last time around to replace three of them and capture a majority in one stroke, but we blew it. Russell, why don't you unmute and ask a question? Russell is our one of our good friends here at DGT and a power expert and a power analyst, especially nuclear power. Why don't you unmute there, Russell?
Okay,
And there you
unmuted
go.
there.
There you
Okay,
go.
thank you. So I'm wondering what you feel about community choice energy. That's where utilities buy power typically, and then they deliver it. Those are their two main functions. Transmission and distribution is one category, and power is the other. And CCEs or community choice energy systems would have to be authorized by the state, which could be the Corporation Commission or the legislature, either one. And then a CCE would then take over the power production. And I'm doing the modeling for that, for the TEP and APS zones or territories. And the modeling is indicating a 9-year process to switch to 100% renewable energy. And if that were to happen, it would be a 98% reduction in CO2, which seemed impossible when I ran the numbers, but it actually turns out to be 98% for TEP and 97 for Arizona Public Service. And the water reduction from power plant cooling would be about 95% in 9 years also. So the problem is it's not authorized in this state. 10 states have authorized it. There are 400 and some CCEs in the United States, and 1 out of 10 residents of the United States is under a CCE. What do you think about CCE and its possibility for Arizona?
Ooh, two different questions there, unfortunately. I'm all for it. Um, there's different models that people have presented, and I don't think any one of them comes smoothly. Like we're, especially as much as, and I'll speak for myself, as much as I'm going to be the person that says, burn down the system, change, change, change. When it actually starts happening, I'll be, wait a minute, wait a minute. So nothing comes easy. Do I think it's possible? Yes, we're gonna have to fight for it a whole lot. Because as you mentioned, we don't have the power party-wise to overcome what we see either in the legislature or the ACC. There's a lot of great people, a lot of great representatives here especially in Tucson that are fighting for good legislation, but it doesn't get heard. So we have to take over we need the legislature to actually get things heard. It doesn't even matter what the bill is on. Um, and then there's just going to be natural resistance and party lines. So when I first started this journey, it was mentioned to me that hating the power company is a nonpartisan issue. I would say within the last month, it has become very partisan. People, and you can see the confusion in their face, but they'll say, I have heard from people, well, maybe we do need to pay more money. And maybe there was someone at one of the community hearings for TEP that said, God bless TEP for all this rate hikes. And so we have to overcome whatever this is on the macro scale, whatever this environment we're in, where we just dig our heels into and don't listen. That's going to be the difference of whether we get to look at something. I would love to see 95% reduction in CO2 and to preserve our water and that's a lot of what people don't realize is when, when we're talking about data centers, it's not just the cooling, it's the production of energy that's using a lot of our water. And we are not winning the CAP war. So we're going to
Yeah.
lose a lot of water. And I want to find out this magical land that these people making water decisions are going to run away to when we don't have any water to use. Because I don't know what the thought is behind that.
You have any follow-up, Russ?
Well, every state that has had CCE authorized it's been a real fight.
Yeah.
It started in Massachusetts, and then it went to other states like Ohio, which is like the laughing stock of energy policy in the United States, and they have CCE now. California, of course, has CCE, and Illinois has probably the highest number of individual CCEs, comprising the plurality of the 400 some CCEs in the United States. And a number of them have already gotten to 100% renewable energy. So it's a really difficult challenge to go with municipality. I would, theoretically love to do that, but the costs and the garbage that they will give you and the data requests to
Yeah.
evaluate their company value will be just total garbage. That's what happened in Boulder. Boulder fought it for over 10 years, and they spent almost $1 billion in legal fees and in the process of doing three different initiatives, citizens initiatives, to get it on the ballot, and they failed. They pulled out, and the utility there, Excel, gave them some reparations in a sense, and then they just got rid of them. So essentially, they're nowhere ahead of where they were well over 10 years ago, 15 some years ago now.
Yeah. And I think one of the other problems with that is I've spoken with employees at TP, and I get it. They're 9 to 5ers. They're not the decision makers. They're just people trying to make a living. A lot of them don't even know that TP is privately owned. They think it is public power. And I imagine that spreads into the community where people don't understand
Yeah.
that it's, a for-profit organization.
But it's got Tucson in the name.
And I'm sure that's some marketer a long, long time ago earned their money.
Absolutely. Let me ask just a general question for general knowledge, because a lot of people may not be familiar with this idea of community-based power. Basically, it's allowing local companies to compete to create the electricity for TEP to sell. And so one of the things that would do, I presume, would be to favor the lowest cost producer, because you'd actually have market dynamics in charge. There'd be more competition, lower price, and thus, naturally, the way technology is now, renewable energy is actually less expensive to generate than fossil fuel power, and so that would create a natural pressure toward making our grid cleaner, making our electrical generation less carbon intensive. Are those assertions all correct? Do I have the right idea?
Yeah. I would say the problem with that, because that's a question that comes up a lot of why don't we use solar? It's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
If you go to that rate formula that's used, the less money you spend, the less TEP can charge.
Exactly.
So the more expensive option is the better business option for TEP.
Yeah, and you don't have inputs. I mean, with
Yeah.
renewable energy, your energy generation is free. You don't have inputs except for the sun or the wind or the waves. Whereas with fossil fuel, you have to buy the fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. And so someone once told me, and there's also, since we do import natural gas, like there's a lot of danger in that. Like natural gas is not the safest thing to be transporting from Texas. And so someone once told me, what do you call a spillage with solar? And the answer is sunlight. So it's so
Indeed.
but then they pick on small details, and like everything needs work, everything needs to get better. So it's not just saying we do solar and that's it, we forget about it. We need to get better in batteries. We need to get better in installation, but it is by far a whole lot safer, a whole lot cleaner, and a whole lot cheaper. And one of the things that has been on my mind lately, because I know the economic thing gets talked about a lot.
Mhm.
I do not believe that economic development equals community benefit. And so it becomes a very big question to say is how much is it worth to sell out our community? Like, what's the price point for saying bringing this company in and using up all our water? Where is that breaking point? And that's a question for our leaders. I mean, hopefully they think about that.
Yeah. Bill Ship has his hand up and been very patient. Bill, why don't you ask your question?
Yeah, I have two questions which are interrelated. And the first question is, you said that the commission now has five Republicans, no Democrats on it, a 5-member commission. And my question is, in a state where we control the top 3 positions of the state, how is it? And while we don't control the legislature, I understand that for probably gerrymandering reasons more than anything else. But with the case of the commission, how has it come to be that they control all 5 positions and there have been no Democrats? Now, I also agree with what was said that incumbents are tough to beat. So once you do get in, that's tough, and especially in what I would consider a relatively obscure position. Very important, but not many people know what the hell it does. And so it's hard to convince people that, hey, this is important and there is, potentially problems out there. So that's my first question. The second question, I'll go ahead and state, and then maybe we get there, maybe we don't, but is related to that, in that when you mentioned that you report to no one other than the voters, and then the voters have the problem I just referred to. Uh, and that can be very corrupting in and of itself. And my question is, does the commission have any self-regulating mechanisms or processes? Is there a code of ethics? Are there regulations of that sort where the commission, if the commission had the will, are there mechanisms to regulate itself?
Yeah. So the first question, I can only give you observation as how because to me it seems very odd that all 5 positions are Republican, but I'm a Democrat, so I just always think that's weird. Um, One, we are slightly outnumbered. Um, Independents in my travels and speaking with them, because whenever I get someone that says I'm an independent, I just ask them. I don't respond or give them my point of view. I just ask them, so what made you be an independent? And none of them have been, oh, I was a Republican and decided I didn't like it anymore. All of them have been, I was a Democrat and I felt the Democrats don't speak for me anymore. And that's all the independents I've spoken to. So that's an issue that needs to be worked on, I think. Um, there's also this misconception that Republicans are better at business. And I would say it's not true. That's why, I jumped in as, hey, I'll be the Democrat accountant. I know business. But people just think that. And then there's also, Republicans, they're a lot more steadfast of just voting straight pick ticket and all the way down. And so that's where we're at. There's been talk about changing the name because it's the Arizona Corporation Commission. And most people don't understand that or even care. I have to admit, until I jumped into the race, no idea what a justice of the peace was. Looked it up. And was it really, usually voted on a name. This sounds like a cool name. And I have actually talked to political insiders and like, yep, that's what people do when they don't know who to vote for.
Right.
It's either usually female or someone with an exotic name. And I'm guilty of that. And so how do we get, and I know Jonathan Hill says if everyone voted all the way down, that voted for Kamala Harris, we would have a different composition of of political parties on the commission. I think we need to entice people, however that is, and I don't have the answer for that. So we make it so that they want to vote all the way down. I hear a lot of they must do this, and if you tell me I must do something, not doing it. But if you can give me a good reason, if you can inflame my passion to do it, then I'll do it. Second question, which I forgot. Can you repeat that?
Well, basically, second question has to do with self-regulation.
Yes, yeah.
And rules of ethics and other ways that you might regulate, the commission might regulate itself.
So there is a code of ethics. And so I first found out about the commission as an undergraduate at the U of A. It was an assignment. And one of the things that jumped out to me was that the code of ethics said not to interact with the utility companies. But at that time, every commissioner had a picture of them at some TEP
Buddy.
APS fundraiser.
Yeah.
And I just immediately thought that was fishy. I personally believe that I would want the legislature to enact something to, so the ACC is constitutional, so that's going to make it difficult. But I do think there needs to be regulation. Like we have this powerful entity that looks after itself. And there has been ethic cases in the past where they just said, okay, we took care of it. We slapped them on the wrist. Good enough. And so we don't have, and I remember you mentioning too, they're only accountable to the voter. There have been meetings where, because people are angry, said, hey, realize you're up for election again. And the response has been, how dare you threaten me? Probably at the same meeting, another agency representative gave their perspective on some energy issues. And they again said, how dare you? You are appointed. We are elected. We are the voice of the people. So they don't see the people as someone to be held accountable to. They see them as, oh, you picked me this one time. Now I'm in total power. And they really like to flash that power. So it needs to be changed. Whatever needs to be done, I'm absolutely in favor of accountability, and just the road to get there is going to be a tricky one.
Yeah. My experience of ethics as an attorney is that you either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And it's really dependent on the individual office holder to hold themselves accountable as much as anything else. And so I think generally you're going to get a lot more ethics out of Democrats than you will Republicans. Sorry, not sorry. Any follow up there, Bill?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, you betcha. All right. Well, seeing as we don't have any other hands up at the moment, let's see if we got anything in the chat that might be a question like. Got a couple of nice statements that we could amplify. Truisms, certainly. Let's see.
Well, I think on that export rate for solar too.
Yeah. The last question, yeah.
What they tend to do is say, hey, we can lower our rate later. This is not set in stone, but that would require them going and doing a rate case for lowering. So it would be as if I committed a crime and went to go, hey, you didn't catch me. Put me in jail. And that's just not
going to happen.
Unlikely.
Yeah. Well, I've always wondered, and I noticed that we have Andrea and Barbara both have their hands up. I'm going to interject a quick question here. And I don't understand why Democrats refuse to do this, to take kind of the traditional messaging of Republicans and turn it on its head and say things like, simple slogans like less regulation, lower prices, more competition, because we can honestly offer that to consumers. And they don't really have a good offer, a good counter, because they're kind of captured by the people that they regulate. You want to make a comment on regulatory capture and why we don't use simpler, more compelling messages that sort of steal the thunder of the traditional right messaging?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've been concentrating on, just like I mentioned, last cycle, the free market. Okay, well, this isn't a free market. We get more if we actually have one. Arizona first was a big thing. Well, we're importing from Texas. Like, so it's taking, you know, I absolutely agree. Even when I talk about like climate change, that automatically shuts down people on both sides.
Yeah.
So I actually took Republican wording. I'm here to protect the heritage and tradition of Arizona. Subtext, we've been a desert for 4 million years. We have no water. We have tons of sun. And I absolutely agree with you that there, and a lot of workshops are out there too that will go over, we don't have to agree with the principles, but Republicans are really good at messaging. They
Yeah.
just are. So I think we need to take that because we've kind of, in my opinion, switched what we believe in. So
Absolutely.
like you said, we can trap them with the free market stuff and the you're not doing what you originally said you were going to.
All right, we got a couple of hands up. Andrea, you have your hand up first. Why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Oh, thank you. Hi. And Derrick, the Republicans are good at jerking people around, not messaging. They're good at instilling fear. But I have no opinion on the subject. My question actually is, why is our power grid not good?
We haven't had the correct investments into the power grid. Um, Usually the options that get followed are new, but it's new for a particular area or for a particular purpose. So part of the Project Blue is that they're going to build a transfer station. Uh, and it's particularly for Project Blue. And on the record, they were even asked, what happens in an emergency? And so that particular switching station, and I learned this, actually goes to Morenci for both the mining, which would be the current largest client of TEP, and the town. If something happens with Project Blue, they get switched off to save Project Blue. And so new infrastructure takes precedence by choice over old infrastructure. No one wants to repair what's broken. They want to build new. And
Yeah,
I
that makes sense.
I agree with your eye roll.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it just not feasible, or are the interconnect wait times too long in order to put new infrastructure on the grid to increase efficiency, increase stability and reliability, and to modernize our grid in such a way that it's more resilient?
I think from my understanding is one, usually the new infrastructure goes into new communities that are more affluent. And that there is technical issues with actually doing it. I can't go into those details because I'm not that person climbing the pole or digging the hole, but
Mm.
it's not as, and it's one of the reasons we do have a monopoly. The idea behind it is, hey, we're not going to be digging up roads all the time to have 5 different electric companies. We're going to give one company a monopoly, so we dig it once and then we're done with it. But it hasn't been working out to what it was intended to be.
All right. Barbara,
Can you hear
welcome.
me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's changed on this screen.
Yes.
I would like to know what your position is on the proposal for neighborhood radioactive reactor sources of energy. I've forgotten what the exact term is for that.
Yeah.
Micro reactors, mini
Yeah.
reactors,
Yeah.
So I have
modular,
spoken
oftentimes.
to some experts about that. And what I come away with is it depends on the expert you speak with. Um, some will tell you, yes, they're going to save the world. Others will tell you that the technology is not quite there. And so it's 50-50. It's just kind of like any other research. You're going to get pros and cons from both. And I personally do not feel safe with where I've been told the technology is right now. But they do say in the future, whatever that means, whatever future, that it will be a possibility, but that the technology isn't quite there.
Dangerous at best.
I it Yeah, I would lean into dangerous as best for myself, but I've also talked to people who work on them and they love them. But I'm going to lean into let's wait a decade or two.
I bet Russell has something to say about that. We were just talking the other day about microreactors. Thank you for the question, Barbara. Appreciate it. And at this point, I am going to turn things over to Barathan to regulate the discussion for a little bit. I have to step away, so I'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Michael.
Mike. I'll sort of try to help out, even if I screw things up because I don't know Zoom very well. But go ahead, Russell.
Okay. Well, a couple of things. On nukes, I've been doing projections on costs for nuclear, and I know you dissed projections, but our projections for the Palo Verde nuclear plant, APS projected 2.8 billion. They use sales pitches. We used regression analysis and some other modeling I created, and we were off by less than 4%. They were off by over 100%. So you can project things if you have all of the variables
Yes.
that give you a high confidence level. And that's in managerial accounting too, which you know. And
Wow, you
which
went
I've
for the
done
heart on that one.
I've done a fair amount of managerial accounting, and I also do accounting, for clients here in Tucson. But so nuclear power, by my projection now, for new nuclear reactors, the large kind, is 33 cents per kilowatt hour delivered, 26 cents just for production. And I'm always ahead of the curve on this. The other projectors, like Lazard, for example, are catching up with me constantly. And they're way over what they used to be, and they're where I was a few years ago. So eventually they'll catch up, I think. But my cost projection for small modular reactors is 40 to 50 cents per kilowatt hour delivered. And the costs that are currently being attained for solar with robust battery is 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So when you take 33 minus 10 or divided by, say, 10, you get over three times the cost. For small modular reactors, it'll be over four times the cost. And it just doesn't make any sense economically. So that's one realm I just wanted to talk about a little bit. The opportunity cost of going with nuclear means that you don't get literally with four times the amount of solar energy for the same dollar if you go with small modular reactors, or if you go with the old conventional reactors, over three times the amount of energy. So then you're only solving one third the problem with the large reactors, or one fourth the problem with the small modular reactors. So then you have to make up the shortfall. And what you do to do that is you go on the grid and you buy power. Well, guess what? The grid is 75% fossil fuel. So you end up buying more fossil fuel energy than you got out of the nuclear just to get what you would have gotten had you bought the solar to begin with, solar and battery to begin with. So it's just a total non-starter. Anybody that's promoting nuclear power is either ignoring the facts or they're lying. They're lying. Or they're just passing on, you know, buddy kind of information that doesn't make any sense. So I just wanted to kind of run that by you. But the other thing, what I really wanted to ask about was data centers. And I've been doing, I have a spreadsheet that I've been helping a lot of the people in the anti-Project Blue movement, DDC. And my spreadsheet shows that with Project Blue claimed that they were only going to use 1,910 acre feet a year. But when you add the electricity to that and the cooling of those power plants, it goes to 9,000 acre feet a year for wet cooling. And dry cooling actually goes up to at least 14,000 acre feet, because instead of cooling on the site, which is highly efficient, you're cooling at power plants, which are very inefficient. And so the cooling is done, the evaporative cooling is done at the power plant, but there's a lot of loss in that process to get that cooling to, say, an HVAC system for the data center. So where do you think that's going to go at this point? Do you think the Corporation Commission has any power over this if you were to get on there?
So the Corporation Commission now has nothing to do with data setters themselves. Everything that leads up to them, so any transmission lines, any infrastructure like that, they would. But I can tell you specifically in the Project Blue case, it didn't matter. So they were arguing that they had a green environmental plan, but that in green environmental plan includes diesel. And this is very common among all the data centers. They say we're using the most efficient class 4 diesel generators. It's still diesel. It's still harmful to the environment. Also, they operate under, and I brought this up with the last couple of city data center ordinances. There's no definition of emergency. So, and we know the Tesla plant out in Georgia is under constant emergency. So they're running their diesel generators nonstop. And so these things aren't thought of. They say these things on record, and it does not matter. And that's, I don't think what we have so much is a technical fight. We need our voices heard. And whatever that takes, that's where it's gonna be the punch, because we do all the technical stuff when we go speak, and they
But
don't care.
then can't the Corporation Commission void out its decision to allow TEP and Project Blue to set their own rates? Do you know about that?
That's a great
Chris
question.
Mays,
Yeah, that
Chris
was in
Mays talked about that at the meeting I saw you
case.
at.
Yeah.
And when she talked about that, she said that basically that the Corporation Commission has passed a ruling that allows TEP to specifically come up with a rate with Project Blue that they both agree on, abdicating the Corporation Commission's authority on this. So what can be done about that? I mean, that's part of my question. What can the Corporation Commission do about Project Blue?
I don't think it's so much what they can do, it's the will they. And I think we're in a political situation where they will not. For whatever reason, the environment is considered a liberal thing, and they are not in favor of the environment for whatever reason. And the water does not, for some reason, again, they think the water is just going to be forever, and that it's always about economic development. That's what gets said, both at the ACC and different levels of government. It's all about economic development, but it's never community benefit or I don't know. I really don't know. That's going to have. Now, if I could just magic wand everything right now, we'd be the most woke ACC ever. But and I don't think this is a me fight getting elected. This is even elected. This is going to be a continual community fight, because the fight is to be listened to, not the technical aspects. They just nod whatever. And quite frankly, when we were talking about projections, it's whose projections, and they take their staff projections, and their staff projections are a little but they go with them. So that I think that's the problem.
I think at this
And I agree,
point,
delay is in our favor.
I think Bill Shipp also wants to pitch in, and we have maybe about 5 minutes more. So, Russell, would you mind if Bill Shipp asks this question? Thanks. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of an observation. And I preface this with the fact that I know nothing about electricity policy, et cetera. So, and I noticed we have several experts here, so I'm sure y'all will tell me, no, that's not quite right. But anyway, I've been in Arizona 3 years now. Prior to that, I lived 19 years in Texas. And I didn't think about this going in. As we continue to talk, I think about the Railroad Commission in Texas. Now, you probably know the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads. They regulate energy. And as a history, why that misnomers that way, but it is. But anyway, the fact is that there you have, and Texas is much more Republican controlled, obviously, than Arizona is. But you have a completely Republican commission at the Railroad Commission. and they have that monopoly on those positions. And I just wonder if you've ever, and I guess the only reason it's maybe relevant to our discussion is, and I don't know the answer to this, is what is Texas, besides trying to get somebody elected, trying to do to change this? And is there anything to be learned from talking to other states and how they're trying to address problems that you're talking about?
I think there's absolutely something to gain from talking to other states. I think we are so locked in. Like I mentioned, like there's employees at TEP that don't know that they're for profit. I'm sure this is not the only case with the other states that are very, there's like 8 states that are very similar to our situation. What have they done? And then also, like one of the things I've been looking at is actually Massachusetts. I had someone present to me. They asked me, what is the cheapest form of power to use? I don't know. He said the one you don't use. And Massachusetts has a program, and we just adopted a program. So if you need to do remodels, contact the Governor's Office of Resiliency. One of our problems in Arizona is we have mid-century housing. And in a lot of situations, a family inherits the home, but they don't have the ability to for the upkeep.
Yeah.
If I didn't get hit by that huge storm a couple of years ago, I'd still have single pane glass. Makes a huge difference, but a lot of families can't afford these upgrades. And so I was looking at the Massachusetts model and spoke with the Office of Resiliency about some adjustments on that. We need to, we would save so much money and so much energy and so much stress on the grid if we provided feasible loans or even grants to people. And I know right now the one that the Office of Resiliency has they term it low income, but it's up to $130,000. So it's actually people that can use it and actually buy into. But yeah, we need to focus on not using energy a lot, which is part of not having data centers and allowing people to remodel their homes so that they're more efficient. And I would say even with a lot of the new construction, a lot of new construction is not built for Arizona. And that's a big energy waste as well.
I just want to jump in here and thank Barathon for taking over for a few minutes there. It looks like he has a question of his own. Barathon, why don't you
I just have one thing to add to what you just said now, Derek, and that is 2 things actually. But first of all, one of the really cool things about Arizona's population, especially southern Arizona and Tucson, is that over the last 20 years, we have really done a great deal at the individual level, at the family level, to reduce water consumption.
True.
And I think a great deal of public education would work very, very well in reducing electricity consumption as well. I agree with you that the cost of reducing water consumption is much less than the cost of reducing electricity consumption because you're going to have to put in double pane windows, for instance. But it can be done. And I think that is something that is outside of the ACC, and that's something we should all try as people.
Hello.
The second thing I wanted to say is that I was with you at that meeting when the ACC actually approved the relationship between TEP and Project Blue. And what happened, what really got me at that meeting was that there was one gentleman on the board who turned to us, each one of us when we spoke, talked about our expertise in the field and about how we knew what we were talking about. And that man turned around to us and said, you know what, you guys should really learn how to look at all of these things because you guys know nothing. That's the kind of people we have running the ACC right now. And I don't care if we have 2 people in a minority or 3, or, only 2 seats now. But by golly, we've got to take that damn thing over.
Yeah.
There are prize idiots sitting there, if I may use a little bit of French. Sorry.
And one of the things that I want to do as part of my platform is I want to get a young person to come on staff with me because you get staff and train them so that they could run the next cycle. And then the excuse can't be used. Oh, they're young, they don't know. Nope, just spent 2 years on the ACC. They have them ready and knowledgeable so that we can get that majority.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for filling in and thanks for your question, Barathon. Appreciate it. So we're coming up and the end. Actually, we're past the end of the hour here. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to encourage people to go into the chat and hit the little 3-dot button and save chat because there's a ton of great information in there. So definitely do that. And I just want to one of the questions I've been dying to ask is, what would we be able to do if we were able to capture both the ACC and the state legislature? And I think you kind of answered that question with your, power efficiency initiative, because that sort of thing is going to take serious funding. It's going to take the state legislature in order to, pluck that low hanging fruit of power efficiency in terms of, extending the lives of our current plant and making sure that we're making best use of our resources. So I want to thank you very much for coming today, Derrick. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. I have one last question, and that's, does the red tortoise in your logo mean anything in particular, or is it just because it's a desert creature?
So I had it as just a desert creature, and then as I looked into it, it's representative of the world. And so I reverse engineered.
So you,
but I just like tortoises. They're just awesome.
Yeah, they totally are. All righty. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for showing up today and asking great questions and being a great audience. I will be signing out now. Save that chat. I'm going to say goodbye for the day. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.